Welcome to another episode of the Minx Labrada's Mysterious World podcast. Once again, I'll be your host. I'm Minx Labrada, and this is our mysterious world. Join me, won't you? So, one of the techniques that I've used in my adult life, I learned a long time ago from a metaphysical guy named Stuart Wilde. He was they called New Age author, whatever. Metaphysics, I think, is a better terminology because Stuart Wilde dispensed with all the airy-fairy and the people that would write these sentences to make themselves, sound smart. And there was a lot of that kind of going on, especially with like these kind of channeler type people. The way that people would talk was pretty annoying anyway, but then, coming off as a guru because you could formulate words in so much as in a certain way with which you would need later. So, right. It was just these weird kind of, and I do like flowery language. But the thing I really liked about Stuart Wilde, with an E at the end, Stuart Wilde with an E at the end, is that he had practical techniques that he taught that like literally allowed you to cash in your metaphysical training at the bank. Like literally you could, right? And, one of the things that he talked about with abundance was not pushing into it and allowing it to flow to you, which I think is really important. Which, of course, brings me to today's sponsor. That's going to be Bitcoin. What do you want to do with Bitcoin? You want to buy, you want to hold it, you want to transfer from the brokerage, your online brokerage where you bought it, to a hardware wallet. Bitcoin, sometimes people will say, oh, well, Bitcoin's down. And that's incorrect. It's never down. Maybe the price fluctuates. As Nolan from Bitcoin Magazine described, Bitcoin network is always running. It's a strong, healthy network. Transactions are happening on it all the time. Okay, so it's never down, and they're never going to win, and therefore the CBDC that they're planning, they're so far behind. Don't even worry about it because Bitcoin is decentralized. Bitcoin is money, and it's an appreciating asset, not able to be controlled by the central banking cartel. Thank you very much, Gary Gensler. And apparently, no, that was the SEC guys, Gensler. I get these guys mixed up. But the guy that's attached to the Fed, along with that, like the female version of Grandpa from the Munsters, Janet Yellen. It was funny. I had to say that in my head and imagine Grandpa to remember her name, but she's totally like Grandpa Spawn from the Munsters. Poor thing. But really annoying voice too. And let me tell you, I just got done. Let's see. I'm about 3 weeks away from when I quit the Navy. And when I quit, I initially took leave to get away from this awful boss guy. And he yelled at me because he's just nuts. And, any Marines out there will tell you, they've been abused by people that think it's okay to yell at them because they're Marines, because they're like, that's what they think the Marine Corps is. And then when you, especially the Marines that work at it, NAS, I all befriended them and they all liked me, and coolest people in the world, totally mellow, all that stuff you see, that's boot camp. And maybe there's, probably your infantry. Infantry is a stress factory for a reason. Okay. And I'm sorry that it happened to those guys and it sucks. But let me tell you, when you release those Marines onto a beach, they will take it. Okay. So there is a reason for that. And honestly, if you're infantry Marine and you're not 100% disabled veteran, reach out to VA Claims Insiders. I went from 30% to 100% in about 18 months after 20 years of only getting to 30%. So I highly recommend them. Brian Reese is a genius. He figured it out. And of course, the beauty of that is turning government funds into Bitcoin, which is great. It feels good in here where it should. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about Stuart Wilde and some of the metaphysics techniques that he taught about abundance and about manifesting and about, well, I think the creativity thing is an offshoot. I've noticed people in the creative field, some of them use the excuse of not having ideas as getting older, and that somehow being young is where it's at with creativity, which I don't really understand, because that's less experience, less technique mastered, less knowledge. Granted, there are virtuosos out there. Joe Bonamassa, guitars. Kenny Wayne Shepherd, guitars. For some reason, I can only think of Kate Bush. Kate Bush, if you listen to her music, Hounds of Love kind of being the pinnacle, which I think was her 4th or 5th album. But I want to say like 24 of those songs leading up to that album, the other albums, were all written when she was like 12 or 13 to 14. I mean, she was like a super mega Mozart level genius, which is what I also think, a guy like Joe Bonamassa and a guy like Kenny Wayne Shepherd, that's a Mozart level genius. Now, if you're not blessed with that level of creativity, you could probably think about Joe Bonamassa. I don't know that much about Kenny Wayne Shepherd, but you could probably also think of Joe Bonamassa as the 10,000 hours rule, which kind of rules out the whole creativity thing, because the 10,000 hours rule is if you work on something for 10,000 hours, it's roughly about 2.5 years, well, then you become an expert, which I also think is really interesting. I went through Full Sail University to study digital cinematography. Took about 2.5 years, and they grind you and essentially make you do the same thing over and over with a digital camera, with editing and the whole thing. And yeah, at the end of it, you got your 10,000 hours. It's pretty smart, and it's worth the money. Even though some people say it's not, I thought it was. Anyway, Stuart Wilde and some of his techniques that you could bring down to the bank and cash in. Well, one of these is something he called turbo thought. And I don't think I'm giving the baby away with the bathwater here, and like now won't be interested in the late Stuart Wilde. Yeah, he did pass away at age 66. Sadly, he was into drinking, which is fine. I don't, for a lot of reasons. Mainly, it was messing with my sleep. And I think my body was turning, your body turns alcohol into sugar. And I think it was like really cranking up my adrenal glands. So I'd wake up at 2, no matter, even if I had one beer, I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep. And there's nothing worse on the planet than insomnia. Well, there's a lot of things worse, but insomnia is like top 5 for sure. But this technique that he taught, turbo thought is what he called it. And, unfortunately he left us early. He was into vegetarianism and the drinking. And I'm wondering, like, if he didn't drink and was into carnivore, if he'd still be around. So for the love of God, any metaphysical teacher out there that's maybe a vegetarian, stop and just have a steak and just relax. It almost sounds kind of like the antithesis of being a metaphysical guy. Is eating a steak. It's not, but there's so much airy-fairy, new agey stuff that's like kind of tied with veganism. Not really, but like implied almost you know, because you want to be. But Stuart Wilde's metaphysics was totally. He had a little cassette tape. You know, this was back in the 80s and 90s when if you wanted information, you went to a bookstore, which I guess they still have them, but there used to be little new age little bookstores. There's one in Gulf Breeze that I used to go to, and I used to buy some tapes there. And well, let's face it, meet metaphysical women. What can I say? It happened. And damn internet cut me off from one of my sources. That's awful. Anyway, sorry. Couldn't help it. It's true. But there was a cover of a 2 cassette tape he had. He would have a lot of these little 2 cassette tape deals, and it was like the size of a book, right? And then you'd listen to it, and some of them had even like a theta brainwave tone on them. He was dealing with theta brainwaves back in the 80s before it got, you know, to be mainstream, kind of mainstream on the internet. It's even on Rumble now, which is cool. And it's a tone that I use. I every morning I do my meditation and I use a theta brainwave, and it really helps you get into a really deep meditative trance, where you can visualize what I call in 4D kind of. And then also while you're in there, you know, you want to be thankful to the Creator and, you know, thankful to Jesus for the sacrifice and the whole thing, right? It's a highly powerful technique. And apparently it's so powerful, well, I can't really call it transcendental meditation. Mantra meditation is a good way to learn to get into deep theta brainwaves where you have a mantra. It could be a word. It could be some numbers. I wouldn't choose the number 6 because if you're ever somebody, that's a Nikki Sixx joke. If you're ever meditating and you're just going 6, 6, 6, that's going to be freaky if somebody walks in on you. You want to have silence and privacy anyway, but don't sit there and just repeat. And then also the other thing that happens is when you repeat a mantra tone, this is not turbo thought, by the way, this is mantra meditation, and I'm going to segue into turbo thought. Thank you. But what happens is you'll repeat that tone. And my hypothesis is that what you're doing is you're vibrating the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is quite a storied little nugget in there in between your eyes. Supposed to have eye components in it, like rods where you could actually receive light in it. And some people even think it can generate light. I think the human body gives off photons, something like that. So there's a vast array of knowledge out there on these different techniques on how to achieve deep meditative trance. I found the mantra meditation the best. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what my mantra is. Once you find it, you keep it to yourself. Or if you want to pay Transcendental Meditation, trademarked, the money to learn, it's probably not a bad choice if you need that kind of attention to where the guy gives you a mantra for however much they charge. It's not cheap, but, you know, it's a business, and I'm totally pro American business, and I'm pretty sure, yeah, there's a lot of Americans transactioning dollars with the Transcendental Meditation people, I'm sure. So, turbo thought. So, this is a technique that Stuart Wilde taught where you didn't necessarily need to be in a trance, or, you know, your own meditation. And when I say trance, you know, don't think immediately Hollywood, right? And it's not zombie trance. And you're not even in like any kind of weird kind of position. You just sit in a chair, and then you know, if your head kind of tilts down a little bit, and then your mouth is open, and then, you know, you're repeating that mantra, and, you know, you're relaxed. That's the key. All right. I don't know people talk about, oh yeah, well your body should be like in the shape of a pyramid, which is why people, okay, maybe. But I've also had really excellent meditations. In fact, all my meditations are really excellent just sitting in a chair. So you don't need to do all that stuff. Try to contort your legs over your knees, sitting in super yoga master style. If you want to do that, you can. I'm just saying you don't have to. And then, the other thing too is when in the Marines, when I was a runner, I was able to access meditative state as a runner. And I've heard of other runners doing that, didn't even realize that's what they were doing, but they were. So the technique for turbo thought requires imagination. I tell you right now, if you don't have imagination, you are screwing up fast to gaining speed. And I'm not sure how you gain imagination. I've always had it, but maybe perhaps if you feel a bit like a normie or bland or mundane, and you're like, well, how can I be more creative? Maybe research that, and hopefully, that's all I got for you on that. Just maybe research that. Good luck. I don't know what to tell you. And I'm truly deeply sorry. Okay. So requiring imagination, and is what you're doing is like something immediate, nothing like turbo thought's not long-term goal planning. Turbo thought is affecting the now, right now, in a positive way and getting what you want. All right. A lot of people, I hear them say, oh, Lord willing. Well, I've been called a blasphemer and what else? This one guy was telling me that when you get into a meditative trance and you get that little zzz, that little buzz in your pineal gland, he goes, yeah, that's Satan working on you. Okay. If you're so negative and so mired in dogma and I ended up yelling at the guy, and we were friends when we were kids, and it sucks. I felt bad yelling at him. He ended up hanging up on me and almost kind of proved his point the way I just really, really got angry at him. But if you know this guy, he'll just keep repeating the same thing over and over in this monotone voice. Yeah, but I know, but it's just bad, but it's Satan. And no matter which way you come at him, so after a while, I wasn't strong enough to deal with him, and I ended up yelling, and it's not good. Also, that is something connected to the Marines that I'm not proud of, where sometimes we do get a little hyper vigilant. Let's put it that way. So the turbo thought, let's go ahead and get to that. I've been flapping my yapper for 20 minutes talking about turbo thought, but yet giving you nothing. So let's give you the technique, the practical technique that Stuart Wilde taught, that I think is something that might benefit you if you're interested in this kind of thing. Listening to me now. So here we go. So a turbo thought is that you have something in your head you want to manifest. Short term, maybe a week, maybe like now, boom, right? And I used to use it out when I was I wouldn't say competing, but when I was out boogie boarding in California, when I got out of the Marines, it was very competitive, especially since stand-up surfers used to really let bodyboarders have it. Boogie boarder, bodyboard. I say bodyboarder. Boogie board's a brand name. Like a hacky sack's a foot bag, and a Xerox is a copy machine. Boogie board is a bodyboard. Okay. So I would use this turbo thought technique out there to catch the big set waves. And is what I would do is I would be out in the lineup with a bunch of surfers, and they're lofted a little bit more out of the water. So they ride a little bit more higher on the surface, meaning it's a little easier for them to make speed because less bodies in the water. And I used to use the technique of using my arms and kicking my feet with the flippers on, you know. When you're a bodyboarder, you wear flippers. And there's one of those stances I was talking about you don't need. I was making images in Midjourney AI for this. And, well, there you go. That's what Midjourney sees when you say a guy gets into a meditative trance and uses a technique called turbo thought. And this is all a little scattered too, because turbo thought's like a little photon torpedo. We'll get to that in a sec. But what I would do out there in the water is I would turbo thought, and and the thought, of course, is going to be in your advanced forebrain. Haha. No, just your mind's eye, which is a fun technique to call it an advanced forebrain, because it is up top and it's up front, right? And if you're visualizing, it's advanced. So don't argue. But you're going to get an image in your head. And I would get this image in my head of big set wave coming. Right? And that's what I wanted. I like the bigger waves, had more power, and you get bigger barrels. And there's just, you know, there's a whole thing now, big wave surfing, and it's gotten so big, you can't really bodyboard them. The surfers are using toe in, and maybe some bodyboarders are doing, but some of those boards are on foils, so they're kind of above the wave a bit, and the foil's in the wave. And where a bodyboarder, you're going down the face, and it didn't look too fun, right? The big bodyboarder waves are generally kind of slabs that kick out and throw over a reef and are really super hollow and violent. And those kind of barrels, like there's a barrel at Ship Rock in Australia. I don't think I would go near that way. I mean, I would go near it, take pictures, but I don't think I'd paddle out. Even maybe when I was 20-something insane, now I'm 57. Granted, Mike Stewart paddled out there, but he's a pro bodyboarder and he's 60 years old. But he's one of those guys who's always going to be, you know, he's a pro. You know, he's always going to be way better than me at bodyboarding, which is fine because he does all the research. Then you get to benefit off of his stuff and buy those products and learn from him, and you have more fun bodyboarding. So that's what you do. So I would get this picture of this perfect wave or the big set wave in my head. And then the turbo technique is you imagine a ball of light at the base of your spine, right? Here's your thought. You imagine this ball of light coming up all the way up your spine into the back of your head, and then you bring it forward and you wrap it around that thought. And then you like shoot it like a photon torpedo at like your target. You know, gets a little, remote viewing-esque in that. I don't know if he used the term target. Maybe I did that because I'm military background. But then I would shoot that thought out to the horizon in the waves. And then I would use kind of a sleight of hand technique. And after I did that, I would start paddling the opposite direction like I saw something to get everybody else to paddle. Because even though some of those surfboards planed out a little better, I had just a really high aerobic capacity back then. I used to run a lot. And that was kind of like my ace in the hole. And I would get everybody to go one way, and then I'd turn around to the direction where I did the turbo thought, and I would catch a set wave, every time. It always worked. And it's very weird to do it in a you're in fluid. You're in the ocean, and to have those kind of immediate effects as many times as I did over and over, for me, it really cleared out any of the skepticism that I even had. Oh, this can't really work. Another time there was a guy, I had his roommate, he was another Marine, and he was a real pain in the ass. Sad. And we were friends in the Marines, but then out in the civilian world, it was just a nightmare. But he used to grill me. You know, clearly I don't like to get grilled. I don't have time. Yeah, now I'm in the space where I just don't have time to argue with people. I've got my own thing. I'm doing my own thing. I mean, if you want to argue, I'm sure there's a blog for that somewhere, but it ain't happening with me. I just block people if they're too ridiculous. I do like a good debate, but the second somebody defends, like this other guy, just had and says what he said, and then genius, right? In the sarcastic form of genius. And it's like, man, who has time for like these children, essentially, right? It's like working on a Hollywood movie. We'll get into that one day. But as Bobcat Goldthwait said, it's not, and he goes, and I don't mean high school kids. He goes, I mean, it's like working with children. And until he said that, I didn't have a way to define what I was experiencing. Low level shit that I did, but still fascinating correlation there. So that's your turbo thought. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't fill you in on what happened with this roommate. So this roommate was berating me. So I just sent him a blessing, and I just thought like, God bless this person who is clearly out of balance and is always angry and irate and somehow thinks I'm the cause of it. And then, so see, those are just words. I didn't really have a vision. But I did those words, and I did the turbo thought up the spine, wrapped the ball of light around the head, and I shot it right at him on the left side of his head because I knew he was left-handed. And Stuart Wilde somehow covers that as a technique, part of his technique. Now, that's not dark voodoo or black magic or being, using metaphysical techniques for darkness, because I shot a blessing at him. All right. Maybe it's a little, little weird druidic technique or something, definitely probably not, probably get kicked out of a Bible study group if I told people that, which is fine. Cause I as deeply connected as I am to Christ and as much of a student I am, when you read the Bible, I think I've said this before, the same buzz you get in the pineal gland from meditation, I get when I read the King James Bible, which blew my mind. I only really started reading it, when I was working for the Air Force, and they're coming up with this, you're going to need a good religious exemption to stay away from the vax or you're fired, basically, which is like the most communist thing ever, but it actually happened. And I might have to share that paperwork with y'all one day, what I laid on them, but it was pretty good. But I was able to find a lot of direct responses to what they're asking in the Bible. And finally, I just got sick of it. After I turned in that, they sent me a questionnaire, and I just, I was like, in the letter I sent you, in the letter. And then finally I was like, Mark of the Beast, pigs. And I'm just so sick of it. But yeah, I think maybe that technique, you're like, it's just imagination, right? Or is it actually, is there something behind it? I do think there's a transference of energy there. Anyway, the guy got distracted by something and forgot what he was saying. And that was it. And, he ended up going back into, the Marine Reserves, and boy, that was so long ago. I guess I have trouble 100% recalling what happened, but I do know that he just like kind of went away from my life is what happened. I moved out and everything, and he never really confronted me ever again like that. And it was just a really interesting, subtle way of just not having it, right? Sending somebody a blessing. And that's another thing, when you're on the old X universe over there or whatever they got, Who knows? The TikTok, whatever. I'm not on TikTok. I'm on X and here on Rumble. And, you know, Facebook maybe for Marketplace, but I don't check it out. It's just like I buy guitars from people that decided they don't deserve them anymore. That is what I do with Facebook. But one of the things I think that is dark voodoo, dark magic, is all the hate that's online and the trolling, which the trolling is like demonic waste of time. And then the hate is just demonic, you know, that's the realm they trade in. That's their currency, right? And there's all this hate for Joe Biden. And my thing is, well, let's pray for Joe Biden's salvation. Pray for that man because he appears to be demon possessed. And if he accepts the love of Christ in his heart, then he'll either have to accept it or it will completely and utterly harsh his deal. Let's put it that way. There's an old 80s phrase. That's right. People used to say that a bit ironically. We knew it was silly. Nobody ever said cowabunga. No one still ever says cowabunga. That's Hollywood crap. But people used to go occasionally with irony, with tongue in cheek. Oh yeah, man, you like really harshed my deal on that last wave. It really cracks me up. Harshen the deal. Dude, you're harshing my deal. So don't harsh your own deal by engaging in the negativity. And I'm sure if you look on my, I'm at Bitcoin Bodyboarder on X. Maybe I should post that up here one day so you can find me on there. But I have been posting my videos on there, so eventually people will figure it out. But didn't exactly line up my brand names when I, so I was just like, whatever. I'm already Bitcoin Bodyboarder on the X. But I'm not calling my podcast that, so whatever, deal with it. Here's another interesting little pose, person manifesting themselves. I tell you what, the Mid-Journey, so I had to tell it to show me a man when I said person manifesting their goals using Turbo Thought. That's just what I gave it, and every one of them was a woman, which is fine, but I think the algorithm might be getting a bit messed up. So, yeah, there's your Turbo Thought technique by Stuart Wilde. Now, and I'll give it to you again in case you missed it, in case I was just all over the board, which I was. I was all over the board. I apologize. So here's Turbo Thought really concisely and quick. This is the TikTok version, right? So a Turbo Thought is where you're going to formulate what you want to manifest in your forebrain, i.e. mind's eye, right? It's got to be something positive and beneficial. Otherwise, you're engaging in black magic, which is purportedly what destroyed Atlantis. They were using and apparently like amplified with some kind of technology. Really, really bad, dark stuff. And apparently, if you do use these techniques for, I want that person to be hurt. I'm going to do the right metaphysical technique. No, don't do that, because what you're doing is it reverses on you tenfold, which you don't want. Not exactly sure about those numbers, but it will turn back on you, which is also, and it's just human energy too. If you're walking down the street and you're, sometimes, there's a couple of times in my life where I walking through an area I knew was dangerous, and I used this technique where I would, if you understand the chakras, then your heart would be the green, right? And I would just open up my chest, and I would have almost like a gun turret on my heart, shooting this green love energy at everybody that I walked by. And it must have worked. I never got mugged. And that was back when I wasn't into guns or knives or anything. I was just fully metaphysical Johnny. Just, oh yeah, I can walk in here. Nobody will hurt me. I have turbo thought, and I have the, super happy love gun from my heart. Boy, that's a completely different meaning song on the Kiss song. But that it is. And this is a cool little image, manifesting, and it's got this little universe in his hands. I shouldn't even be commenting on my backgrounds. I am interested in where this is all going, though. But I will say that back in the day, when I was reading Stuart Wilde, I was even in the Marines when I was doing that. And my father had been into it and given me one of those books when I was on leave. And I had a little collect, most of his books were thin, maybe 100 pages, maybe 200 tops, 250 maybe. And so I had maybe 3 or 4 of his books. And there was this is 1988, 89 era. And I was in 2nd ANGLICO, Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company, which I've explained before. Game show hosts for the Army, hey, we got a jackass at grid 4972-84536. He's got a sniper rifle. Bill, tell him what he's won, And, then he finds out because we know where he is and we're calling in fire on the fucker. So that's what happens, which is precision, right? The opposite of what they did in Gaza. Precision, which I'm still blown away, but that was the response. That response, October 7th required surgical strikes from special forces, not destroying grids, which is what they did, which is, genocide really is what it is. Whatever. Unbelievable. 2024, we're still having genocide on Earth. But there was this major in our unit. It was an Army major. An ANGLICO, we had a lot of naval aviators in it, and we had an Army artillery officer, and we had a British Royal Marine. And because on the Navy side, we would call in fire. It didn't matter if it's Navy or Marines, whoever's, available. And that's who we used. Also Navy, we had sea surface warfare guys, because we would talk to the destroyers, and, they could steam around and find where we were. And, they're like 7 miles away. Stuff like that. And of course, the Army officer, he was our artillery expert. And that was another thing, is these guys were like experts in what they did. And since we had to talk to them and liaison our product to the Army, or the British Royal Marines, or whoever, they did ops with the Spanish Marines, Italian Marines, Italian Marines, unbelievable. They would save up their little, they had this really gnarly red wine ration in their rations, and they would save it and then drink it all at the end of the op as a party. And I wasn't into drinking anyway, and I took a little tiny sip, and it was just like paint thinner. It was gnarly, probably amplified by the fact that I didn't drink. But I thought, I'm gonna try some Italian wine. Ugh, nasty, super dry, super dry red wine. And our colonel had a keg of Budweiser flown in. It's just, which I thought was like really James Bond. That was really cool. Oh yeah, we're gonna get a keg of beer and bring it in on a helicopter. That was sweet. Even though I didn't drink, I just thought that was cool. So during an inspection one day, the major was in my room, And in the Marine Corps, you don't get much, but you get a dresser, and it was kind of like a dresser desk type bookshelf thing, and it had a lock, some privacy, and then like a wall locker, and these 3-man rooms at I forgot the name of the area at Camp Lejeune, but over on that side, we're kind of near the water. Anyway, the major went right for this book, The Force, from Stuart Wilde. It's a book called The Force. And you can get it on an audiobook now. Let's see here. I have that pulled up. Yeah, The Force audiobook, which I'm surprised all the Jedi people haven't downloaded this and made it their Bible, because there's like a Jedi like religion, and I don't know. Sounds like more rules and more dogma to me. But Stuart Wilde's pretty awesome. This one was a real small book. You can tell by the length, 49 minutes, probably worth your time. Very interesting. He was really into the silent power. He wrote another one, Miracles, which was really good. And he kind of gets mixed in with some of these other people like Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra. But Stuart Wilde was never really brought any pretentiousness into it. It was all practical, and he was very funny. So it was this kind of revelation in the whole movement of those kind of New Age writers, to where you're into it because it's fun, not because, I better learn something, right? Right. And here's one about intuition that I'm not familiar with. I'll have to try out. So anyway, there's Stuart Wilde. And so the major has my book, The Force, and we're starting to talk. And I think he must have been read in on the remote viewing program that was going on in the 80s in the Army. And I think this correlates to that weird test I took where the guy that sat next to me a couple spaces down, but they had cleared out the room for like special testing in Marine boot camp. And I looked around, there was like 7 or 8 of us. And then they brought in like 3 other people. And this guy they had brought in sat about 3 seats away from me and looks at me with a scar, just from the forehead to his chin, like someone whacked him with a shovel. Like the face, you cannot ignore. If that dude talks to you, you are looking at crushed in shovel face head guy, right? You're going to do that. And, he's like, you don't want to do good on this test. So I'm kind of wondering now, or not wondering, like after I saw Men Who Stare at Goats, or found out about that program, later saw the movie, it is all I could think of is, oh, wow, I bet that major was read in on it, because what he was talking to me about, and I don't remember the exact conversation, but we did talk about manifesting, and we did talk about, I didn't realize he was talking to me about remote viewing, but that's what he was doing. He was talking to me about finding things and like in the real world. Not because I was talking a little bit more metaphysical area about goals and all this, and you manifest, and you have these, right? And he's like, well, that's one use for it. That's good. He goes, do you know anything about finding real things in the world with that technique? And I thought about it, and I did mention to him about the turbo thought, and he thought that was interesting. And that, when I explained to it how I used it, he had to go anyway, but he got a little bit, I could tell he was thinking like, geez, dude, you know how to do that? And you're just catching waves with it? Was kind of his, the look on his face was, right? But anyway, that is a real program. You can check it out. That there was actually a remote viewing program in the Army, and then the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats is definitely worth seeing. And it's about the remote viewing program. And in it, they do it as a comedy. They did it the right way. It's a very, very funny movie. But essentially, that remote viewing program, they were able to find hostages and send extraction teams out there to go, get these people, which I think is interesting. And they say that it's not done today. Maybe one of the best examples of America using remote viewers was after the attack at the Rome airport, which I was at as a kid. What were they? Were they Libyans? They were Libyans. Libya was a big problem in the 80s, and funding terrorism and all. Or at least that was the story we got. Who knows what research has been? Let's just go ahead and call all terrorists agents of the central banking cartel. That way we don't have to nail it down to just some country and we really know what's going on, right? Okay. But back then, there were these Libyans and they opened fire with submachine guns in the Rome airport and were lobbing hand grenades, bouncing them on the floor, and chucking them into the crowds, right? Just blowing the crap out of all kinds of people. There was an American girl that died. I think she was 7 or 8, something like that. Really tragic crap, right? And so our response was to bomb Libya. But before we bombed Libya with F-111s, I think, I could be wrong about that. And I ended up meeting a Marine too, in ANGLICO, that was on the ground lasing the target. Yeah, those laser guided bombs. Yeah, there's somebody on the ground pointing a laser. The bomb doesn't have its own laser. The bomb has a sensor, and it's got correctional fins on it, and it finds that laser and it keeps making corrections till it goes right to the little dot. And usually that dot's infrared. So don't be, if you're out there making a movie about a laser guided bomb, don't use a red dot. You see the infrared with your little NVGs, bright lights up all night, right? Anyway, so apparently Reagan used remote viewers to find out that attack came from Libya because it was pretty quick after. So that program really did exist. Of course, now they say it didn't exist. And of course, the problem with saying it didn't exist is, what happened when you deny? Okay, now you've occulted it, right? You're hiding it. And anything hiding is, if you got to hide it, it's not good, right? Sneaking around, maybe you have a masturbation problem and you sneak around, right? You like tentacle porn or something and you don't, it's not out in the open, right? That's hiding stuff, okay? I use that as like an extreme kind of personal example for maybe somebody out there. But is what I'm saying is by denying it, now I know you have to keep state secrets, but by denying that we were using psychic spies, I think is what happened was they got into the black magic aspect of it and realized, if we could find people, we can use this technique to take people out too. And maybe that's kind of what happened. Maybe that's part of the downfall of America is that I am long on America. I'm sure we're going to get through all this, but what we're going through now might be the backlash of all the bad mojo that we pumped out through advanced forebrains. You don't want to do any of that. Okay. I do remember being on Fort Bragg because we supported a unit that was there. Sometimes I would have to drive there and pick up guys that parachuted in there. That was my first job in the Marines was Motor T, and that helped me get into 2nd ANGLICO, which is cool. and then later on their water safety survival instructor, which, no more trucks. They gave me a nice Avon inflatable rib, which was cool. And I really missed that little boat. I should get one for Pensacola. It'd be great. Sneak around. But the thing about the technique and the hiding of it is that if they're going around sneaking around and doing stuff and not realizing what they're doing, and the Army might even be responsible for the Gulf Breeze 6. And the Gulf Breeze 6 it made national news. And this was in the early 90s, 1990, maybe 89 era. And what happened was there were soldiers that went AWOL. They were in a spy unit, or at least in school. You know what? Now that I think about it, they may have been in school right here in Pensacola at the cryptography school. I always thought they ran away from somewhere and, let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and read the article so I kind of know what I'm talking about and not just trying to pull this story out of my butt from 30 years ago. All right. This is in the New York Times. Think about it what you will. Headline, 6 soldiers found. The fact that it made the New York Times to me is significant, being that this is like an X-file, essentially, is what it is. 6 soldiers found in Florida, AWOL from U.S. spy unit by Eric Schmidt, special to the New York Times. Okay. 6 soldiers missing from an Army intelligence unit at a sensitive national security agency eavesdropping post in West Germany have been apprehended in Florida. Okay, so wow. All right. And are the focus of a routine counter-espionage investigation, the Pentagon said today. There have been no arrests, and the Army said it has no evidence so far to suggest that the soldiers are spies. No, they weren't spies. They were test subjects. A 3-week-old Army regulation requires that Army personnel with access to classified information to be detained immediately if they extend their leave without permission. The Army says it does not appear to be an espionage case, but it's a Pentagon spokesman, Bob Hall, but they have to make a counterintelligence investigation because it's standard procedure. Let's get a little further into it. July 9th, they were discovered Friday night when police officer in Gulf Breeze, Florida, stopped a van because its taillights were not working, and a computer check revealed that the driver was one of the missing soldiers. Gulf Breeze is a few miles from sprawling Naval Air Station, Pensacola, and Corey Station. It's a naval electronic warfare training center where at least 2 of the soldiers had trained. Let's say that's why I made that connection. The police traced the other soldiers to a nearby house and a campground. Captain Kenneth R. Hicks of the Gulf Breeze Police Department said that when the police burst into the apartment early Saturday morning, the soldiers had at least $4,000 in cash. I never heard that before. Well, it doesn't really get into it that much. Okay. This doesn't provide any of the weirdness. Let's see if this story does. This would be from another, the Tampa Bay Times. Let's see. AWOL soldiers' excuse. Ouija board made us do it. Yeah, that's right in the headline. Maybe they're changing it. What I was told, and I actually went to the MUFON meeting where one of these people spoke. And, by meeting in the 90s, it was all a big money-making thing. MUFON, it was $7 at the door at the Gulf Breeze, what would you call it? Not a civic center. It was like it was like a multi-purpose building at one of their parks, and you could rent it out and do whatever, right? And then this time they had a stage. This lady was talking, and it was all a little bit too polished for me. The way she moved and the way she talked and her big giant shoes. And I mean, I was kind of like, wow, this is like really slick. I was thinking just people are going to come and, sit in a circle with chairs and tell UFO stories. It was like a full presentation. It lasted like an hour and a half. It was wild. But anyway, let's go ahead and read this story here. Published July 28th, 1992. When Vance Davis and five of his... Excuse me. Little water. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Thanks for the veal. Thanks for coming out. Try the veal. And I won't eat veal, just grown up steak. When Vance Davis and five of his friends went AWOL, it was reported that they had gone to Florida, to a Florida beach to await the second coming of Christ in a UFO. No way, says Davis. How ridiculous can you get? Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ. Why would he come in a flying saucer? I never heard any of this before. Davis says the reason they left their Army intelligence post was simple. Ouija board spirits said they were needed to help lead the world through an impending cataclysm. For 2 years, since the six turned up in Gulf Breeze, they have remained silent. But Davis now says he wants to tell the story and set the record straight. And because according to the Ouija board, race riots in Los Angeles were to be the signal the group should go public. That's like every day now. The others will come forward one by one, depending on public reaction to what he has to say, Davis said. So I think I saw the presentation in, want to say 93, 94 maybe, is when I moved back to Pensacola from California in 92. Yeah. The six former intelligence analysts, all with top secret security clearances, were reported missing from their Augsburg, West Germany base, July 9th, 1990. They were arrested 5 days later after one was stopped for a broken tail light in Gulf Breeze. I guess he, intelligence unit. I guess he wasn't intelligent enough to have a van without broken tail lights. That was a cheap shot. Excuse me. Let's see. A panhandle town known for reported UFO sightings. 2 weeks later, they were honorably discharged after an investigation found no evidence of soldiers from the 701st Military Intelligence Brigade had been involved in espionage. As punishment, they were reduced to the lowest rank and forfeited half a month's pay. Davis, originally from Valley Center, Kansas, had... Valley Center? I didn't think there were any canyons in Kansas. What do I know? I thought it was just all flat. Maybe that's Oklahoma. I get those two mixed up a lot. Had the rank of specialist. Others with ranks and ages at their arrest. PFC Michael, that's only E2. 19-year-old from Farson, Wyoming. PFC Chris Perlock, 20. Yeah, again, maybe E2, E3. From Osceola, Wisconsin. PFC Williams Setterberg, 20. From Pittsburgh, Specialist Kenneth Beeson, 26, Jefferson City, Tennessee, and then Sergeant Annette Eccleston from Hartford, Connecticut. That must have been the woman that was talking. Yeah, that had to have been, because I do remember her saying she was a sergeant. I wonder what she's up to now in terms of, well, the whole thing, just her whole life. I hope she's a 100% disabled veteran. Not to experience the pain that we feel, but so she's getting compensated for the pain that we feel. Thank you. So, let's see. We decided to do some experimentation. We wanted to see if there was something actually to it. ESP, parapsychology, ghosts, tarot cards. Davis says the group hit brick walls until they tried a Ouija board. Someone showed up, he says. I'm talking spiritually. In the months that followed, Davis says several spirits talked to the group, predicting the Gulf War and the 1990 Iran earthquake. At the end of May, we were told we might think about trying to get out of the service because there's going to be some serious things occurring in the next 5 years. And yeah, that was right before the first Gulf War. and being in the service would not help us grow and become what we were supposed to become, Davis says. What they were destined to do, he says, is prepare people for the coming chaos. This will be the changing of the earth, and Jesus is involved, Davis said. He will come back and rapture. The fundamentalist belief that believers will be swept to heaven before the world ends is real. Davis said when the group couldn't find a legal way out of the army, the Ouija board told them, leave, just leave. Stunned, they decided to put their faith in the board's message that things would work out. We had top secret clearances. We never did anything wrong in our life, Davis said. Being AWOL was the furthest thing from our mind. But on July 3, 1990, they hopped on a flight from Munich to Atlanta and went to Gulf Breeze to see friends, a psychic and her housemate, Iris, who became Vance's wife. Okay, so they went to this woman named Iris's house. Wow. After their arrest and release from the Army, the group split up. Davis, 27, lives in Albuquerque with his wife and 8-month-old daughter, does odd jobs and gives seminars on self-sustaining lifestyles. With everything we were told that's supposed to be occurring in the next 5 years, we want to help. We want to be here to help, he says. Some changes, he says, are earthquakes and volcano eruptions, including the eruption at Mount Rainier in Washington, a gas leak that will devastate New York City. I don't know if that ever happened. And food and race riots in every major U.S. city. Well, maybe those are 3 things that are starting to come. The race riots seem to have happened with the BLM and the, I don't know if you've seen X lately, or the stuff going on in TikTok and that beating that girl to death or not beating that girl into a seizure. Awful, awful stuff. Yeah, if you're a white person, just, use some turbo thought to keep yourself safe. Definitely, and use your little love thing, break the monopoly of mind control over mainstream media with your own energetic love. How about that? Some changes, he says, are earth. Okay, we did that. And, U.S. City will bring martial law and economic collapse. I mean, how long ago was this written? But I will say that at the meeting that I do believe was that Sergeant Eccleston, Annette Eccleston, I believe her name was, she said that they thought the person speaking to them through the Ouija board was an alien. And that's all got left out. Which also brings me to the whole deceptive practice of the whole thing. Because everybody says, oh yeah, and we get abducted, they tell you all this nice stuff, but they're actually deceivers. They're the massive, massive deceivers. Who would come if they want to meet you and interact with you? Why are they coming at night? Why is it all secret? Right? I find that very suspicious. So that's really interesting. Also, the other, I guess, hypotheses about the Gulf Breeze 6 going around was that they were actually being communicated with by somebody in the remote viewing, kind of like the dark program, seeing if they could manipulate people to get them to go do what they did, as a proof of concept, which is also why they didn't get busted. They just got released, basically. They did kind of get busted. You get reduced to lower rank and get kicked out. That's called getting busted. But normally when you get busted in the Marine Corps, where you're going to do some jail time first, or they're going to take like a lot of money or all your money. But it doesn't sound like, and it sounds like they just want to kind of gloss over it and sweep over it. So anyway, that's my connections from your remote viewing with Turbo Thought to Stuart Wilde, and then I had that conversation with the guy, and then the actual remote viewing movie, Men Who Stare at Goats. I recommend that. Had to have been a program, and maybe this whole remote viewing mental stuff was manipulated into getting some soldiers to fly from Germany to Atlanta and go down to Gulf Breeze and then trip out. Could have happened. We don't know. Of course, I just want to mention Alex Jones real quick. God bless him. And we do know now that he was targeted specifically by the deep state. Thank God for Sound Investigations. What's the name of that company? I forgot. We'll figure it out and I'll mention them next time. They were awesome. They got to the bottom of it. And God help us all. Let's just pray for Jones, pray for us all that we're going to be okay in advance. Let's thank for that in advance because we will be okay. But what they did to Jones, they tried to do to everybody else. And apparently they have a file on everybody and they tweet stuff out and they do stuff to try to get you to react, a la January 6th, right? Very interesting. And once again, that brings us to the conclusion of the Minx Labrada's Mysterious World podcast. Once again, I am your host, Minx Labrada. Thanks for your time. I honestly, truly mean that. And it's another great day in America.